Microsoft 365 Backup is out, it's in preview, and we're going to jump in and see how this thing works, what it does, how it does it, and how you can start to use it in your organization. Now, we're going to cover configuration, backups, and restores using this tool. I'm going to show you how it all works, but first, let's start talking about what this product does and some of the unique things about it. So the big question, what is M365 Backup? What does this thing do? Well, what it is designed to do, at least currently, is back up SharePoint, OneDrive, and Exchange mailboxes. There's different ways to control what data you want backed up. The fact that this is made by Microsoft gives it some very distinct benefits compared to third-party solutions. Although this will integrate with third-party solutions because there is going to be an API available so third parties can develop solutions to manage and control M365 Backup. So what are the benefits of using M365 Backup? Well, it offers pretty quick backups and restores. So there's one right there. I don't know the speed test compared to other third-party products, but it seems to be pretty fast. I think they say you could restore about 1,000 OneDrive accounts, SharePoint sites, or Exchange mailboxes in about 12 hours. So not too bad, really. It offers roll back and roll forward operations. So depending on what you're actually doing with the restore, if you're restoring a SharePoint site or OneDrive account, currently it's going to roll back the site. So it's going to do a complete restore, and anything that existed after the backup point was created or the restore point was created, anything before that or newer than that will not be there. So it's a complete restore of the state of that site or account at the time the backup was created. For Exchange mailboxes, it does a roll forward. And what a roll forward means is that if you're restoring a mailbox from a backup that was created last week, but you got an email yesterday, or obviously you'd be getting emails since then, all of those newer emails will still be in your mailbox. It's just going to restore the older stuff, the stuff that was there previously. So that's kind of the difference there. A rollback is going to make it exactly like it was at that point in time. A roll forward is just restoring. It's going to do that, but it still keeps anything newer that has come in. So I hope that kind of clarifies the difference between those two. Now, Microsoft is going to be changing some of that. So at the end of this, we're going to talk about some of the future things that are coming up for this that they've already announced. A rollback, in the case of SharePoint, it's going to be a full restore. Now, the full part does include recycle bins. So both of your recycle bins, the first and second stage in a SharePoint or OneDrive site, those are going to be restored as well. If you have a ton of stuff in your recycle bin, it's not only going to get restored, but you're going to be charged for that. The pricing is based on how much data is being backed up. So if you have it, and obviously if it's restoring this recycle bin, that means your recycle bin's backed up as well. So interesting thing to note there. Your data is also consolidated in M365. That is one of, I would say, probably one of the biggest benefits to M365 Backup. Your data it stays in the M365 service boundary, that trust boundary. It's not moved off site. It's not moved into a vendor's storage location, anything like that. It's kept all within your control in your own M365 boundary. And that's another thing to note, is that even though you're being billed through Azure, the data does not live in Azure. It stays in M365 specifically. And on that note, one of the other benefits is the fact that it stays in your boundary, but it also stays in the geolocation of your data. So if your data is in like the East Coast region data centers, so that's where all of your data is housed, your backup will be there too. So all of that stays right with your data. It's all kept together. Another big one, backups are going to be read-only. Nothing can change those backups. They are immutable, as Microsoft calls it. So that means that if someone gets into your environment, if there is some sort of an attack and data is wiped out, and really that's one of the big reasons why people do these backups, is in case there is a cyber attack, in case there's ransomware, anything like that that's going on, they can't touch your backups. There's no way to overwrite those backups, to encrypt the backups, to do anything with them. They are protected. So that is very, very valuable. Next is role-based access control for the backup service. So you're going to have global admins, Exchange admins, and SharePoint admins. The actions they can perform in M365 Backup will relate to that particular role. So global admins, obviously, they can do everything. The Exchange admins can only back up and restore Exchange mailboxes. They can't do anything with configuring SharePoint or OneDrive backups. Similarly, the SharePoint admin role, whoever has that will be able to manage the SharePoint and OneDrive backups, but they can't do anything with the Exchange mailbox. So there is some clear separation, but Microsoft indicated they may be adding a backup admin role that would kind of do everything. So you don't, if someone needs to be able to manage it all, but you don't want to give them a global admin, which is very common to deny that role, then you could have a backup admin role to kind of delegate things just to that one person. And the last big benefit to this that I see is you can restore to a new location. So if you need to restore one file that got deleted 6 months ago and nobody knew it until today, and you need to restore that, you don't have to overwrite the entire site. You can restore it to a brand new URL. You can grab that one file, then you can just delete the site collection. So that's really nice. And then in the case of Exchange, what you'll do there is, if you don't want to restore to the original location in the mailbox, you can pick the option to restore to a particular folder or to a new folder that is created with the date of the restore operation. So that's really cool. Now let's talk about the backup schedule, how this thing is scheduled, because essentially you're going to turn this on and configure the locations you want backed up, but then Microsoft has a fixed schedule of how it's going to, or how often it's going to back up the things. So starting with SharePoint OneDrive, it's going to, for the first 2 weeks, so for the first 14 days, it's going to back everything up that you say to back up on SharePoint OneDrive every 15 minutes. And after the 14-day period is up, it'll start backing up once a week, and it will retain that backup for 1 year. So you will have that for a sliding or moving 1 year period. After a year, the backup is deleted and you can't get it back. Now, that is a fixed schedule. None of those times, none of those intervals can be changed. So you can't hold it longer than a year. You can't hold it less than a year. So you are charged monthly for that backup for 1 year once you back something up. You can't delete the backups so that you can save on costs or anything. So just be aware, if you turn this on and start backing things up, you're going to be charged for 1 year for that backup. Exchange is a little bit different. So the way Exchange is backed up is a mailbox be backed up every 10 minutes instead of 15. And it'll just hold that for 1 year. So there's no difference between a 2 week period and then, longer than 2 weeks like there is for OneDrive and SharePoint. It's just every 10 minutes and retained for a year. All right, so we've covered all the major talking points before we start to jump in here. Now I'm ready to jump in. Let's get this thing turned on, start backing up some stuff, and show you how the restore works. So I'm in the M365 Admin Center. We're going to click on Setup, and if you don't see that, then just click Show All, and then you should be able to see Setup here. We're going to scroll all the way down until we see Use Content AI with Microsoft Syntex. By the time you use this, maybe this is going to be rebranded to SharePoint Premium, because that's what the new name is for Syntex is. So just be aware, it's going to be down here under File and Content more than likely, but you'll see something about either Syntex or SharePoint Premium. But once you're in here, you'll need to set up your billing if you haven't done that already. And that just really is just picking your Azure subscription, resource group, and the region that you'll be using. Then you'll click on Manage Microsoft Syntex or Manage SharePoint Premium, depending on if they've gotten around to rebranding this yet. So we'll click this, and then you'll see backup. It shows preview here because as of the date of recording, it is in preview status, and things are going to run a little bit slower, they said, compared to just final release. So just be aware of that. But right now it's preview, but we can still start using it. So I'll click on backup, and then it'll give you a little bit of information. about this, and then a couple of links to the documentation if you wanted to have a quick way of getting there. But I'm just going to click turn on, and then it's just going to let you know, okay, you're turning this on, you're accepting the terms of service, no problem there. Click save. And then turning this on seems to take a little bit of time. All right, so that is all done. Let's close this. And now that that's turned on, what you'll do is go under settings and you'll see Microsoft 365 Backup. So we'll click on this, and here's where we're going to start to configure things. So what are we looking at here? We've got 3 different areas of backup we could configure: SharePoint, Exchange, and OneDrive. Each will have its own policy. And what the policy really does is it just defines what resources are going to be backed up for this particular service. So I can configure what SharePoint sites I want backed up, what Exchange mailboxes I want backed up, and which OneDrive accounts should be backed up. So they're all configured individually. Again, the role-based access control is in play here. So depending on what your role is, you'll see up to 3 different things. And then you'll see the restoration tasks here if you have any of those going on. So what we're going to do first is let's go ahead and get a SharePoint site backed up. We're going to click Setup Policy, and it'll start to walk you through all this. But we'll click on Next. Oh, it does also show you initially backups are kept for 14 days. After 14 days, 1 backup will be kept per week and retained for 1 year. So kind of reminding you of the frequency of how this works. We'll click Next. And now we're going to be defining the scope of this backup policy. So which sites should be backed up. And we've got a few ways we can add or identify the sites that we want backed up. We can use a search method, so we can search for individual sites. We can add via rules, which I think is going to be very valuable here. And so if you've got naming conventions for your sites and you want to be able to pick out a particular group of sites, you can add it this way based on what the URL or the site name contains. Or you can add, a site that was modified in like the last 7 days. So if a site just becomes inactive and doesn't really have a benefit anymore, it'll just fall off of the backup schedule or the backup policy, so that you're not backing this thing up anymore. So this will tie into your lifecycle management policies here. Although I would say that lifecycle management would probably take priority over this, and you probably should be deleting that site after some point. In which case it would stop being backed up then too. And then the other way you can do this is you can upload a CSV. There's a template you could download and then just fill this thing out with all of the different sites. So if you've got an automated system that can fill this thing out, then you can use that and upload it there. What I'm going to do is just pick one particular site. Let's do we'll do the HR site. It does show you the amount of space that everything's going to take up. So I'll add in the HR site. Now I've got one site here. We can click Next. And then it's just the final review before you save this. So I'm backing up one site for a 14-day period. I'm just going to have 15-minute backups. And then after that, it will switch to weekly backups and retain it for 1 year. So we'll click Create Policy. All right, that is done. Now let's go into the Exchange policy and get a mailbox backed up. So again, just kind of a welcome screen and reminder of how things are going to be working here. Backups every 10 minutes, retention for 1 year. So we'll click Next. And similar screen here, but we can add, we manually pick mailboxes, which is what I'll be doing, but we can also pick via distribution lists or security groups. So this is probably the method that I expect most people to do, is they'll have a distribution list or security group to house everything. So they'll have all of their important mailboxes all within there, and that's how they'll add all their mailboxes to the backup policy. Again, we also have a CSV if you wanted to go that route. But I'm just going to pick, I'll just pick this mailbox here. And we'll click Next. kind of final review here and create policy. So that policy is done. Let's just go into OneDrive and just check this thing out though. So what can we do here? Similar, because you're really picking an account. So similar to the mailbox option, you're going to select things the same way. So we've already done the Exchange mailbox, so I think we'll just skip this one. And we've got two different things we are backing up now. It shows that the status is processing, so it's currently setting up the backup policy and then starting to get the initial backup. We can click on View Details and see what's going on here. So this policy was last modified by me. The backup frequency. At this point, we can't really change anything with the backup frequency. I don't know whether that's always going to be the case or if we are going to get some control. This is in preview status. Microsoft's building out their infrastructure and scaling everything up to support all this. Maybe once kind of the dust settles, it gets stabilized, and in final release, maybe we'll have some options. Who knows? But what we need to do now is wait for all of this to get set up. Microsoft says it can take up to 1 hour for the policy to be created, and then up to 1 more hour for that initial backup and everything to take place. So we'll check back in once that's done. Okay, so the backup policies are now active. We can see that right here with the status column. And I've allowed a little bit of time to pass for two reasons. First, so that the backups can start to accumulate, so we have more information to look at, but also so that I can go and modify the data on the SharePoint site and the Exchange mailbox. Because when you do the restore, if there's no difference between the backup version of the data and the live version of the data, then the restore doesn't do anything. It just doesn't do anything, with the exception of restoring a SharePoint site to a new URL. But in any case, I wanted to make sure that there were some changes so that there is a difference between what has been backed up and the live version of the data. So we're going to do a restore. The first thing we're going to do is click on this restore button, and actually, regardless of what button you click on that screen, which of those restore buttons, they all take you to this same screen. It's just that which one is selected by default is the only real difference. So I could have, even though I hit the one for SharePoint, I can come in here and pick an Exchange mailbox restore if I wanted to. But look, we're going to set the SharePoint one up. We'll click Next and add the site. Now it's going to show all the sites that have been backed up. Since I've only picked one site to back up, then that's why there's only one here. But we'll add this one and click Next. And now we're going to pick the date and time where like an incident occurred. So essentially, if there was an attack, if there was a deletion, something like that, we want to pick somewhere around that time, because this is going to show us the restore times before that date. That's why you'll see that message up here. The closest backup before the specified date and time will be selected. So we'll pick today, and we'll pick, we could pick 1 o'clock. Because we've had multiple backups since then. So we're going to click Next, and now it's going to show the confirm restore points screen. So any of these sites that you have selected to restore, they'll all be here. And for each one of these, we can put a check in here, and it'll show us the restore point that it auto selected, which is the 1 o'clock one. That was the closest one to the 1 o'clock time that we picked. It'll also show a standard restore, which you'll see some of these will show standard restore, some will show express restore, and the only real difference there is the express restore is going to be a much faster restore process than the standard restore. But that's really about it. You want to try and pick those express restore points if you can. But what we can do is, if we don't like this 1 o'clock time, we want to pick a different time, then we can click on select a different backup, and it'll show us all of the backups that are available to us. It'll show the ones before that 1 o'clock time and the ones after the 1 o'clock time. So I can come in here and specify like 12:10. We can pick the 12:10 backup or restore point. And now that's updated on this screen, and we can click Next. And we can tell it here if we want to restore to the original site, so an in-place restore, or restoring to a new URL, a new site. And this is a really good use case for when you want to recover a file that's been deleted. Since we don't have roll forward restore yet in SharePoint, this could be a good option to get that one file without losing all of the other data that happened after this restore point was created. So we're going to pick this. We're going to create a new site and restore to it. And then just on the review screen, make sure everything looks good and restore. So the restoration task is completed. Let's go and do the Exchange one. And it does take you to the restoration task screen where you'll see I've got a couple of operations here in progress where I've already done this one time. So we're going to go back to Exchange and hit restore. We'll pick the mailbox this time. Add that and click next. Similar screen here, but we have one more option. So we can pick the date and time, but this is to restore everything. So if we wanted to pick specific things to restore, then what we can do is click on the selected content only. And here we can pick, the type of information that the time frame we want to restore from. If it's just the past 48 hours, and we can add filters so that if we were looking for a particular email or the emails that had attachments, we can add filters here to narrow down the type of content we want to restore from, so we can get just the information we want. But I'm gonna do a full restore here. So I'll go ahead and pick the time. We'll see similar information that we saw before, where we can select a different backup. We have our times showing up here before and after that time period. So we can pick the 12:10 one here as well. Click next. Same thing as the SharePoint site, just worded a little bit differently. We can restore in place, or we could restore to a new folder. So this won't be restoring to a new mailbox. It'll just create a folder in that mailbox with the missing items, or with the restored items anyway. So we're going to pick this option as well. It'll even tell you what the folder name is going to be called here. So very cool feature. Let's hit this restore, and we've got both of these things running. We'll check back once they're done and see how it looks. So the restores have finished. Let's take a look at the SharePoint Admin Center and see how this new SharePoint site turned out. So remember, we restored the SharePoint site to a new URL, and this is what was created. So here's the old HR site at its normal address, and then it created HR R0. So it restored it to a new site and added R0 just to make the URL different. It's possible that if you had multiple restores, it would do R0, R1. I'm not sure that the naming convention works like that, but it might. That would be a pretty good guess, I think. So what we can do is we can click on this site, and you'll see that it's identical to HR except for this new banner at the top. Look at this thing. So it lets anyone know who actually finds this thing, assuming someone was able to find this, that the site is read-only at the administrator's request. So the site was restored and placed in a read-only state. Ideally, this site should only be used long enough to get the data that's needed from this restored version, move it back into production on the production site, HR in this case, and then delete the site, get rid of it. You don't want to have this kind of thing hanging around. So it's really cool that they already thought of that, of restoring it in a read-only state. I like that. It was a good decision. Now let's look at the Exchange mailbox restore and see how that turned out. So we've got the mailbox here that I restored into. We see that recovered items folder here with the timestamp that was created. Because we chose to restore this to a new folder instead of restoring it in place in the normal part of the mailbox. So once we are in here, we can see a copy of the inbox, or a folder called inbox, with the particular items that I deleted after the backup was taken. So in this case, we're restoring the inbox contents because I wiped them out after taking the backup. So just to show you. So restoring, very, very straightforward. Really, I think configuring those policies and getting everything configured the way you need to as far as what sites and what content and mailboxes to back up. Once that part's done, restoring is very, very simple. Now let's talk about how this affects compliance and things like e-discovery and retention labels. So let's talk about that. So with things like M365 Backup, M365 Archive, SharePoint Embedded, a lot of these new things that all involve one common thing or one thing. Having your data or a copy of your data in an unexpected location within the M365 boundary. And that does raise a lot of questions around compliance because at some point you may have to run e-discovery to find some documents for a legal case, and you've got to be able to make sure you're searching everything. Well, in the case of e-discovery, we've got somewhat good news. With Exchange mailboxes, even if an item has been deleted out of the live mailbox, e-discovery can still find those particular items that exist only in the backup. So e-discovery will work flawlessly for Exchange items in backups. SharePoint's a little different, SharePoint and OneDrive, because if the item doesn't exist in the live site or the live OneDrive account, e-discovery is not going to find it in the backup. I don't know why. It doesn't make a lot of sense why. Maybe that's just a current limitation, and they're going to go back and fix that, make it work better. But right now, if the data only exists in backup form and not in the live site, e-discovery is not going to find it for OneDrive and SharePoint. So kind of an issue there, but that's what we've got to deal with right now. Moving on to retention labels, though. So, these backups are kept for 1 year. It's non-negotiable, according to Microsoft. There was nothing we can do about that. That does include retention policies. So if you've got a retention policy to maintain data for 10 years, a backup is not going to be subject to that retention policy. The data in the backup is not subject to that retention policy. So that's only going to apply to your live data. Now, if you have retention labels on your data and you restore that data, the policy is going to be in there and it's going to be live and in effect at that point. But you'll have to restore it to get that point. So it'll respect the retention label. It will restore data with labels on them. No problem there, because it does a full restore, including retention labels. But just keep in mind, it's not going to apply to the backups or the backed up data itself. Similar to the retention labels, sensitivity labels that you may have applied to your data will be restored with those labels still applied. So if you had sensitivity labels applied to your files that were backed up, they will still have those applied when they're restored. If you get rid of them on the live site and you restore that, it'll be reapplied because it all comes back with those files. So keep that in mind as well. So what new things are going to be coming? Well, the one thing that we know that Microsoft is working on, at least the ones that they can say publicly, are the roll forward for SharePoint and OneDrive restores. I think it's going to be, we'll have the ability to restore in particular files as well, but the roll forward is going to be a big part of that so that we can restore files that were deleted and not blow away anything that was added or modified after that backup had taken place. That's going to be important because while we can get around that and just restore to a new SharePoint site, it would be really valuable to be able to have that roll forward ability for SharePoint and OneDrive. But what features do you think are missing from this? Let me know in the comments below what you think needs to come to this, or maybe it's the ability to change the backup schedules. I think that that would be pretty good, I think. So let me know what you think we need to add to this. I'm happy to provide the feedback to Microsoft. Just let me know what to tell them. I think that the M365 Backup is a really nice complement to M365 Archive. Now, if you haven't seen that one yet, then I want you to click on this video to learn more about that, because the archive ability is going to be really nice to tie into your lifecycle management and governance of SharePoint. It's one of my favorite features and long overdue. So if you don't know what that one is, then check this video out and I will see you on the next one.